Kyle, thanks so much for setting this up. David, thank you for your comments. I'm going to try, I didn't prepare anything because they didn't give me their comments, so I can't be that clever. But anyway, what I want to do is first answer a couple of your questions. In 2005, someone who I quote in the book wrote an article called "The Upcoming Stab in the Back." About how when the liberals take over, perhaps win the 2008 election, then we're going to get out of Iraq, and then Iraq is eventually going to fall. So we've already got that. I mean, in 2005, they wrote that. As far as, will they care in 5 years? Think back. I started teaching the Vietnam War about 1985. I could fill up an auditorium teaching that in 1985, but 1980, probably not. You know, all those Rambo movies came out in the middle of the 1980s. I mean, you know, I had kids with their t-shirts, Rambo, let's, you know, get them this time, you know, stuff like that. So 5 years, I don't know, but 10 years, it's going to be very, very important. And think about 1945, not too many movies on the war until mid-1950s, then lots of them. So I think that's about, we've got about a 10-year. Luckily, my second edition will be out by then, which will answer all these other questions. Internationalization, absolutely. Yes. Turkey, Iran, of course. Of course, they're going to be much, much more important later on. And what was going on as far as the locales? We've got 18 different provinces in Iraq, you know, and a lot of them are different, just like different areas of Vietnam. You know, the more Catholic they are, the closer to Saigon or whatever. I mean, so yes, the local areas are also going to be extremely important. As far as the memoirs are concerned, they're already coming out. I just finished Rumsfeld's book and Decision Points, written by a team, Bush's team. Rumsfeld had a team to write it too. You should see, I mean, nice to be able to have a team so you don't have to write your own book. You know? And some of the analogies they use versus what us historians use. We see Iraq in terms of Vietnam, an unnecessary war that became a quagmire. They see Iraq, I'm not making this up. You read either of those or Doug Fife's book. They see Iraq as World War II. Their analogy is that we were stopping Saddam from attacking us like the Japanese attacked us at Pearl Harbor. All three of those books, that's what they say over and over again. We were stopping Saddam. Remember the unmanned aerial vehicles that were supposed to attack us from the East Coast? This was early 2003, started with Bush's State of the Union in 2003, then Colin Powell gets up there 10 days later, February 5, says the same kinds of things. They've got these sprays and chemicals and started asking all of these kinds of questions. Well, if we're going to be dropping chemicals on the eastern seaboard, how many will they kill? You know? Of course, they didn't have the fact that the United States Air Force refuted all of this. We'd shoot it down in about 3 seconds, and the American Navy would be out there taking care of those ships. But that wasn't brought up. But I mean, so they see it very differently. They see the Iraq War very differently than how we see it. And if you read Decision Points, you'll see the president many, many times comparing him with historical figures like Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman, and on and on and on. But the one that really got me was that by 2006, he's so frustrated with the war that he turns to Megan Sullivan, one of his aides, and says, "How's it going in Iraq?" This is like August. And she says, "It's hell, sir. It's absolutely hell." And he goes, "Yeah." So that's when they bypass Rumsfeld to start thinking about a different strategy. 3 years of staying the course, 3 years of that. So we're going to bypass Rummy and we're going to bring in some others. And eventually the result of that is betray us. So how does Bush write? He says, Lincoln found his Grant. I'm not making this up. Franklin Roosevelt found his Eisenhower. I found Petraeus. Well, he didn't really find, but I'm just going, wow, this is truly amazing. That's nice to have those speechwriters, huh? Oh well. So, yes, thank you for. Will the interpretation change? Well, of course, it will always be challenged. Whenever you write contemporary history, you get what you deserve, you know. And I love writing contemporary history, but yes, it will be challenged. Now, I just want to indulge myself, not you, for just a couple seconds. Why did I write this book? I wrote this book because I was the Mary Ball Washington Professor of American History at University College Dublin in 2001 and 2002. So I was there at that time. I was there during the Evil of Access speech, and all those Irish kids were absolutely just stunned. You know, you guys are going to go off and attack somebody else that had nothing to do with 9/11. Doesn't make any sense to me. Then I got back after teaching there, and I'm teaching in my class in spring of 2003. And I walk into class in February after Colin Powell's speech, and I say to my freshmen, these guys are going to get us involved in another Vietnam, folks. I was there in 1975. I'm a Navy Vietnam vet, but I was there in 1975 when the helicopters took off. I realized that how Americans felt about losing that war. I said, I never would have ever thought that somebody, Bush is my age, somebody who's a baby boomer would go through this, seeing all of that, and get us involved in an unnecessary war. I can't believe he's going to do this. If he does do this, here's what's going to happen. And this. 4 years later, fast forward, spring semester 2007, knock on my office door. Hey, I was one of your freshmen 4 years ago, and you said this was going to happen. Everything you said happened. You're my favorite professor. You made my day. I said, during all of this time, my students, even my upper divisions kids, they're really bright. They're all on their cell phones and their little playbooks, but they're really bright, but they didn't know what was going on. And I was even confused, and so I started to write this book so I could understand what was going on. Reading 6 newspapers a day from Al Jazeera to the Wall Street Journal, okay? And especially the 3 newspapers, LA Times, New York Times, Washington Post, who always had Tom Ricks or somebody on the ground in there. Also reading those military reports. NPR did a fabulous job with all of those interviews, all of them indexed. Geez, you could just sit there and read these things all day long. It was amazing. The Combat Studies Institute, they had tons of interviews. Oh, gee whiz. So, in other words, there was stuff out here while I was writing this book, especially the last 2 years where I can go back and revise. And so that's why I wrote it. I wanted my students to know. I wanted educated public to know what was going on. And I even wanted to figure out some things for myself. I originally was against the surge. But that's not the interpretation that you get in my book, because if you want to count it as decreasing violence, that's exactly what happened. Of course, paired with COIN, counterintelligence, and with Americans going out into these communities with Iraqi troops. The same thing we're doing in Iraq, or in Afghanistan.